talking a little bit about the state of New York. I've been here. This is basically my ninth year living in Manhattan, and numerous numerous businesses here have closed, even locally in my neighborhood. Downtown, Midtown is basically all but eradicated in terms of, especially with retail, restaurants. I believe 60% of all of what's it called Yelp businesses, especially the restaurants, have permanently closed. And so the Bible makes a good observation when it says the righteous flourish. It says, when the righteous flourish, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people groan. And I would say that's a very good indication of what's going on here in New York. When you have individuals like Cuomo, who is basically in charge of the state, as a result of his wickedness and evil that he perpetrates upon the people here in New York suffer as a result of his incompetence. And of course, many people will think that New York will recover. It will recover quickly. People will come back because of the low rents, etc. But there are no jobs. We're seeing more and more business owners flee New York City, perhaps even moving further out to where things are more open. Or we've seen many businesses move to places like Florida. We've had numerous tech regional hubs leave New York. Like, for example, Goldman Sachs has left New York. Most of these large financial institutions that of course, pay good money. And then you have their employees that typically live either in the financial district or in downtown and midtown. Many of these individuals who would pay big bucks to live in the city because they're making big bucks. And of course, most of those people have left. New York has lost over 300 billion in terms of, 300 million in terms of its annual revenue, because of the amount of people. I believe there's like well over 300,000 people that have left New York for other states. New York is in one of the top 5, I believe. It's either top 5 or top 10 in terms of cities that people are fleeing. And so, of course, one of the biggest businesses here in New York is typically real estate, especially when it comes to like commercial office real estate, is basically where New York makes a lot of its money. Yes, New York being a hub for tourism is true, but it doesn't necessarily make, in terms of the amount of money that's lost from the revenue, I think it's only about 60 million of the 300 million annually that it's lost. So while tourism makes up a good amount of money, it doesn't necessarily make up a huge chunk in terms of the revenue that New York City makes. Most of it comes from the businesses and from the real estate. And of course, with things like restaurants, because this is here talking about the New York City Recovery Index. And so, of course, restaurants, as you can see, have been decimated in New York. That's indicated by this right here. You should be able to see that here. New York restaurants have been totally destroyed as a result of Cuomo's legislature closing down restaurants, even though the science doesn't say anything about the virus being transmitted from people who go out to dining. You've had numerous restaurants out here that have basically converted, you'll see one box where the restaurant is, and then right on the street, you'll see another box. Of course, it makes no sense, but this is what the people have had to do to try to stay open. Just try to follow the rules. In terms of Subway, as you can see, Subway ridership is basically about a third to a quarter of what it should be. I believe it says that it's down something like 70%, showing that no one is coming into the city. In terms of those who would commute for work, we've seen most businesses have abandoned their real estate and have obviously seen that to remain open, in terms of being able to keep their businesses open, they don't need this real estate anymore. And so the need for office space has all but dried up. And here they're, of course, talking about making and converting many of these buildings that were once utilized for office spaces, and then now converting them over to like rentals, apartment rentals. And of course, that will just drive down the prices. But the important factor is for all of these new apartments, basically, to get rented, people have to be able to find work, right? And so if all the big businesses here, there's even now attack, I believe, on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange here, where they're trying to tax them, and then now they're considering leaving as well. And so this is basically the death spiral that New York finds itself in, because they need to be able to get their revenue from somewhere. They're not really looking to cut a lot of the spending that they're doing. And as a result, the city is now finding itself basically circling the drain. And so it goes on to state here, we'll look down here, you can see here, even hospitalizations for the virus have gone up for quite some time. In terms of unemployment, has soared with more than 10,000 more unemployment claims than the previous week, 10,000 more than the previous week. This represents significantly larger year-over-year percentage increase of 300% compared to the previous week of 31%, bringing the measure back down to the late 2020. So New York is not recovering. In terms of, let's go down here for ridership for the subway, down 70% from last year, 67% less prior from the week before. MTA said on January 19th that it will postpone a decision to increase metro fares by 4%, citing a possible bill of $8 billion from the Biden administration. The MTA previously announced a potential fare increase due to financial fallout from the virus, right? And so for the few people who do live here, who will be utilizing the subway and will be utilizing maybe like the express bus, like myself, we will have to pay more as a result of poor leadership. In terms of the restaurant industry, it has been decimated. Restaurant reservations declined during the week of January 9th as the estimated number of seated diners decreased by 91%. 91%. And so basically, as people start to flee, as people lose their jobs, as people work from home, because they're no longer coming into Manhattan, into their offices to work, as a result, it's basically decimated the restaurant industry here in New York. And so, of course, one has to wonder, and this is another good article that talks about real estate here in New York. Of course, currently, because of everything that's going on, it is a renter's buyer's market. But what many people just don't understand is that because of the actions of Cuomo, New York City, it will take well over a decade for New York to regain any semblance of being the city that never sleeps as it was before. The bars, the restaurants, the clubs, all decimated. Right. So for anyone who is basically looking to move to New York City, I mean, I moved to New York City because I worked every other weekend at the hospital. I worked nights. And so I enjoyed coming out. I enjoyed the New York City life, the New York City nightlife, which basically has all but dried up. So if you're a young person looking to come to New York, there's no reason to, because there's really nothing going on here. Broadway, movie theaters, restaurants, clubs, dining areas, all of this has been destroyed in New York because of the policies put in place, because of artificially suppressing the city's economy, because of course, basically trying to get Trump out of office. And as you can see, in terms of the hospitalizations have basically been on the decline from October up until now. You can see that right there. In terms of from April, they've been almost non-existent, and yet we've seen bars and restaurants, gyms basically bearing the brunt of much of the policy making as a result of Cuomo's decision. And of course, now, he is in a rush to get things open because we'll have nothing left to open up to, which is where we are. Most of the restaurants here by me have closed. Very few people that I see there. You might see one or two people that are working. Currently, there's no indoor dining. I believe they said maybe by the 15th of next month that they'll start to do 25%. But many of these places will just be destroyed. It's a shame. It's a beautiful city. And of course, as a result of poor leadership, as the scripture says, when the wicked rule, The people are the ones who are made to groan. And so many of the people who will suffer as a result of these decisions will typically be Blacks and Hispanics, who in these areas, like in Brooklyn and in the Bronx, will of course suffer as a result of the job losses. When the wealthy leave, what just happens is then they raise taxes on everybody else, and wealth is relative, right? I mean, if you make 40,000 a year, someone who makes 100,000, is very well off. Just like if you make 100,000, the person who's making 250, right? That person, you would look at them as being much more wealthy. If you're homeless and you don't have a penny to your name, the guy who's making 40,000 seems like he's got it all. And so as a result, taxes, of course, will be made to, the people who live here, the remaining people that live here will bear the brunt of the increasing taxes, just like the increase to the MTA, because they're not looking to cut services. They're not looking to reduce spending. And so as a result, Cuomo is looking to, of course, raise taxes. And of course, he's going to raise taxes on those who are considered wealthy. I believe it's like those who make over 5 million that he's looking to raise taxes upon. But the only thing that will happen is that those individuals will just leave. That's all. They'll just leave the city. There's no reason to stay here, especially if you're going to be taxed more and get less. There's no restaurants, all the industries that make a living in a big city, entertainment, restaurant, dining, shopping, it's all gone. So why would you stay? Especially if you're going to get taxed. You're going to get taxed just to live here, just to bear the brunt of the poor policies that are put in place because of Andrew Cuomo. And this is the state of affairs that we have here in New York City. The city will eventually collapse into chaos as people start to lose jobs. We'll start to see crime. We'll start to tick up. I think murders and shootings have gone up like 300% from last year. As a result, from 2020 compared to 2019, shootings and violent crimes have gone up like 300% in the city. And it's typically, where is it? It's typically within the Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. And of course, this is the rhetoric of those who claim to care about minorities, but their end result, the end result of the policies that they put in place, typically serve to impoverish those they claim to protect. And the end result is that the city collapses. I don't think things are going to get any better, especially from what I see. I talk to a lot of, like I said, I've been here 9 years already, and I talk to a lot of the business owners, typically here in the restaurant areas, because I try to eat out a little bit more to try to be in support of my local restaurants or my local delis. I don't really shop as much online to get the cheaper prices. I'll typically shop locally at the local supermarket. Maybe I cook a little bit less because I can afford to, and I'll eat a little bit out. I'll order out, I'll tip a little bit more to those who are still working here in the city to be a little bit more supportive for those industries so that they don't go under. But the end result of what's going to happen in New York is the spiral that we are in is going to continue. I mean, shoot, had I not signed an additional 2 years to be here, I probably would have left myself and gone either to Florida or to places like Texas, just because there's more freedom, there's more available jobs, and as a result, there'll be less crime. There's more freedom to move about. Obviously, the weather is nicer, but it is what it is. And unfortunately, by comparison to what's going on in California, where the inhabitants of California are trying to kick Gavin Newsom out by getting the 1.5 million signatures that they need to basically have him removed from office, there's no such thing that is coming out here in New York to have Cuomo and, of course, individuals like de Blasio removed from office. And it's typically, like I said, typically the people who will suffer are typically going to be the Blacks and Hispanics. I see a lot more. I see a lot more homeless people. I see a lot more people out here. They put the garbage out, and I see a lot more women and homeless people, or I shouldn't say homeless, but maybe they're just individuals who are rummaging through the garbage to get more cans, so that they can take them back for the deposit. There's a sad state of affairs of what we have here in New York, and it is only going to get worse.